This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
Okay, before we get started, check out nectargrowth.com. nectargrowth.com. It's free to join, but not for long. Nectar is an extension of the roller coaster. It's where you can start your own journey of self-exploration and growth. In Nectar, you'll find different topics of interest, daily blogs, affirmations, journal prompts, and you can connect with some of the fantastic coaches that have been on the roller coaster. Soon, we'll be adding videos, meditations, live discussions, and events. Our signature course is a journey of self-improvement, and it's valued at $397. But once you join, it's available to you at no cost. So if you're feeling stuck, if you feel like you need to change and not sure where to start with Nectar Growth Network. Come join us. You know you're worth it. Now, let's get on with today's show. Are you speaking so that people are listening? Or are you just talking? How we communicate can either build trust or lead to misunderstanding. Over the past 18 months, we've had ample examples of how miscommunication can lead to frustration, anger, and confusion. Effective communication is essential every single day and in so many different ways. Joining me today is Jeannie Moravits to share important communication techniques that we can use in all of our relationships to gain and retain trust. Hi, Jeannie.
Hi, Lucy. Thanks for having me. This is such a pleasure.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask you to share your business name because I am having communication problems today and for some reason could not get out the name of your business.
And this is such a perfect way to start. Thanks for asking when you have confusion. That's the number one step, right? So the business name is Dynamism Leadership. It's coaching and consulting.
Perfect. And, you know, we don't give enough thought to communication in the moment. And for me, I'm in Nova Scotia, Canada, and we're in the middle of a provincial election. And last night on the news, I caught a clip of, he's leading our province now, and he's running, and he was speaking in front of a group of people. And I looked at him, and everything about his mannerisms, his face, and how he was trying to speak over people, I looked at him and I thought, how can anyone trust you to lead this province?
Right? It's shocking. It's shocking how people show up in such a manner where they take control of the room or take control of the conversation, or they're overpowering on other human beings. It's mind-blowing to me. And I've seen it over and over and over again with leaders. And basic HR 101, give people their space, right?
And that's the thing, is that when we look to our leaders, we're expecting them to lead. And in leadership, you have to be able to trust them. So what are some of the things that, we can do, whether we're, leaders of an organization or we're just leaders in our own circle of friends or our own families? What are some of the things that we can do to be better at communication and, gain and retain that trust?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And with leaders, they need to show up in a manner where they actually trust their staff, learn how to trust their staff. So that comes down to communicating and listening, and we can break that down into a little bit more. And also in a way where they are trusted. I've been asking a lot of people lately, what is it about your job? What is the one reason you would want to join this huge, like it's a resignation revolution right now. So many people are leaving the work world. And it comes down to, I don't trust my manager. And you know what I have found is they don't trust them because they don't communicate everything. And having spent decades in human resources, I knew there was a time and place for communicating, good, bad, and otherwise. And I used to coach my leaders all the time and say, of course, we don't have to tell them everything. At some point, it's going to come out. But if you don't let them know what's happening and let them be involved in the process of recovery, whatever the problem may be, they're going to create their own situation. And 9 out of 10 times, it's more negative than what it was. And so I work with a lot of leaders in saying, you know what, why aren't you sharing that? Tell me why you are holding that back. And they'll say, they just don't need to know right now. Why? Why don't they need to know? And it's not just what you tell them, but how you tell them of whatever the information is. So in order to be trusted leader, staff needs to know that you have their back, that they can come to you at any time in their day, in their career, in their years of employment with you, and bring up all of them, all of themselves. So if they want to be able to show up authentically, feel like they belong, they have a sense of inclusion. But if they're restricted to, oh, I can't, for example, Jean, I can't come and tell Lucy because I'm afraid she's going to react. When I really need a solid response from her, I need some help to get to the next situation. So communication and trust goes hand in hand, holds hands in the workplace. And the employees need to be able to trust their staff that, like I just mentioned, when they come in and they say, you know what, hey, Lucy, I have this issue and it's actually of personal nature and it's going to cause me I have to leave early today. And if you as the manager react in such a way, now this person's going to start, just like kids almost. And I don't want to compare leaders and employees to children and parents, but in a sense, those who have children, when you reacted to your child spilling milk versus responding in a way where they learn how to not spill the milk anymore, it's a huge difference. Huge difference. So say, back to my example, I come in and say, hey, I have this personal issue. I'd rather not tell you about it, but if I can leave right now at 3:00 and I'll come back on, the day after tomorrow and my head will be 100% in the game. And you say, I trust that you got what you have what you need from me. Is there anything I can do to help the situation? If they say, no, I think I got it. My family's covering me, whatever. Okay, I'm here for you if you need me. Go take care of yourself. That's the number one priority, or go take care of your family member if that was the situation. And I'll see you, in a day and a half. And then they come back. So the leader is trusting the employee, trusting their words. The employee is trusting that, they're not gonna react and like fire me. You know how many times it blows me away. I've heard so many times lately, people like, I can't be honest with my manager because they're gonna fire me. I'm like, that's too bad.
But there is that layer of distrust out there. I mean, I've been in multiple jobs and, different situations, and been involved in different meetings, and people always know when, say the head of the table is saying something, if they're not giving you the whole picture, you can't help it. It's for me, it's gut instincts. You're like, I don't know what's going on here, but something's not right. And then what invariably happens is that you leave the boardroom and then there's chit chat. Everyone's coming up with their own ideas of, well, what is it that they're not telling us, and that never helps things. So
that we're going to say something?
No, go ahead.
It completely reminds me of many board meetings or leadership meetings that I was in, and whoever was presenting the topic, they would say, are there any questions, any concerns? Did I leave anything out? How are you guys feeling about all this? And I would sit back and I'd observe the participants, and they'd be like, no, I'm good. I'm good. We'd walk out of the room and they would ask me, so what does that mean? What does this really mean? They'd start asking all the questions. I said, I'm sorry, let's all go back right back in the room. And why don't you ask the questions? Why are they afraid to ask the questions? So they would feed it to me, the head of HR, so that I could feed it, get the answers and feed it back to them. Well, that's not efficient, right? So what was it? What was it about me and my abilities or my sense of confidence that I had and was able to raise my hand and ask the questions? And oftentimes I would observe the room, like you were saying, your gut feel, and I'd be like, no, something's missing here. So I'd say, it feels like something's missing here. So I was the one who asked, the 400 questions a day. And I think, so what is it? I think it's confidence and willing to take a risk, and know that you have to get your gut feel, you have to get those things answered. But a lot of people are, for whatever reason, they're afraid to ask. They're afraid to stand up for themselves, afraid to stand up for their values. And I've worked with a lot of leaders one-on-one on building this confidence, building their self-esteem, building their willingness to take chances. And so it goes both ways. Like the employee, you need to ask the questions. You need to be willing to do that. And leaders have to be willing to hear it. And I've heard a lot of, hear the questions asked and be able to answer them. And I've experienced a lot of leaders who, why'd you ask that question? I just said it. And I'd be like, so the way you said it, I don't think we got it. Right. But I was that person to go, wait, maybe there's another way to answer that, because people don't get it the way that certain people talk down to people or above them. Right.
Yeah, no, I've definitely experienced that as well. And there is a certain amount of vulnerability that comes in communication. You have to be authentic. You have to show up as yourself, or people are going to clue in that something's not right here. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the boardroom. So how do we translate some of these skills into our everyday life so that we're doing that in all of our relationships?
It's really important to, how do I respond to that? It's very important to listen. Listening is the number one skill in communication. And I say this all the time. I guess my mother taught me this. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Think about that. Listen twice as much as you speak. And if we do go back to some of those basic things we learned in, kindergarten, they always say that, right? You learn everything in kinder and then you just build from there, the foundation. Listening to what people are saying and how they're saying it and when they're saying it is very important, right? So many people, they act like they're listening, they're looking at you in the eyes and they're following you along, but they're too busy thinking about how they're going to respond. And all these listeners, I know you have somebody in mind because you see their face, and the minute you finish answering their question, they didn't hear a word you said. They just start talking. They didn't even take a breath. And you know that those folks, they're not really listening to you. And let's go back to leaders and employees. If a leader isn't listening to the concerns of their employees, their employee will never trust them. And they know, like you said, it's an intuition thing. They're not giving me all the information. Or whatever. It's your intuition, your gut feel is like, they're not listening to me. They don't care. They don't care about me. They don't care about me as a whole person because they're not taking the time to listen. And we can, I can speak for my husband and I. I always throw him under the bus on podcasts.
I was going to throw myself under the bus here, so go ahead. Let's see who gets 2 more tire tracks on them.
So there's a lot of times where I'll say something and vice versa. I'll put myself out there too. He'll say something and I'll come back with something else and he'll go, I just said that. And I'm like, oh, I had no idea what you just said because my mind was too busy on something else. So my advice there, be 100% present. And when you are 100% present in the moment, you're that much more efficient. So we're trying to multitask, and hey, I'm one of those that thinks multitasking is still doable, but it isn't. You can really only focus on one thing at a time. When you do, you finish that and you did it 100%. So if we all take a moment in our relationships and commit to ourselves, I'm going to show up 100%. So what I do with my husband, back to that example, honey, his name's Mike. Mike, I have something important to tell you. So now I got his attention. Now you better be fast because he's an engineer, right? So just get to the point, leave the feelings and the emotions out. And in the work world, often that's important too. And I used to say this about ladies, but it's not just ladies. Like, let's just leave all the emotions and all the extra out. Like, just the who, what, where, how, and why. Get to the point and people will listen because you're efficient in that communication.
It's funny when you're talking about listening and react. I'm going to throw myself under the bus because I used to be completely guilty of, when you're having an argument, you're just waiting for the other person to take a breath so you can make your point. You don't give a shit what the other person's saying.
You're like, oh, that was a good one. I better think of another.
I'm like, oh no, they're talking. You're like, oh, I got a really good comeback. Don't forget it. And you're so busy trying not to forget the comeback. You have no clue what's going on. So yes, I'm guilty of that. Totally guilty of that.
Think about that in an argument or a disagreement. If we stopped, gave the person a moment, gave them all of us, and really listened to what they were saying, how they were saying it, what a difference it would make. So it doesn't matter what I think I'm going to say next. I'm really going to listen to every single word. And at first, when you practice this, you literally have to like get closer to it. I'm talking into the mic too close because I'm getting close to you. Get closer to them, really pay attention because you have to build this muscle, this skill of really listening. And it's amazing how quickly you'll go, oh, I hear. Oh, and that's the other trick. You have to paraphrase what they say. So acknowledge and validate their words. So I understand you're frustrated because you expected to have that day off and I gave it to somebody else. If I were in your shoes, I'd feel the same way. So this is what I'm going to do for that, right? So acknowledge and validate, paraphrase what they said. Because how many times have we thought they said something and we went down this entirely different road because of what we assumed we heard? You know what they say about assumptions, right? So I really try not to. I'm like, you know what? Can I just ask you a question? I just want to make sure we're on the same page. I do this and I coach my HR folks too, my leaders in human resources, to document the same way. So we had this conversation, so we're on the same page, ... is what we talked about. And this is what you're going to do by this date. It's the same thing in every single communication we have, every single relationship we have. So what I hear you're saying is this: am I spot on, or did I miss the boat? And you can see how efficient that can be when you really take the time to ask, like you did. Okay, I don't know your company name. Dynamism. I don't even know how.
I don't even know if I can say it right now.
You asked me, that's amazing. So, like you were saying, the last 18 months, people have like lost their connection to communication, and they're feeling like disengaged with a lot of folks. But if we took the time to say, I don't get it, and it's okay, we can't get everything, or you know what, Lucy, I am so sorry. My dog was barking and the refrigerator's overflow, or the dishwasher's over, whatever it is, the washing machine's overflowing. I'm all yours right now. Can you please, thank you for taking the time. Can you please just repeat it? Right. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page and we can move forward together. And I didn't miss it, because so many people are afraid to raise their hand and say, I wasn't listening. And then what happens is they go down one path, they go to another path, and they're not even working off the same page. So I would say stop and listen, paraphrase, make sure you guys are on the same, everybody's on the same page, and acknowledge and validate what people say. That really helps them feel they're heard. And don't forget to listen to your own self-talk. Your own, all those thoughts and feelings in your head, don't forget to stop and listen to those too. Because oftentimes we are going down this path because we believe one thing and it's not really true. So I often ask people, how true is that thought? How many times has that really happened? Right? Because a lot of people are like, I can't do this for this reason. How true is that? And more often than not, there's no truth to it. It's just a limiting belief.
Limiting belief. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I had that conversation with my son the other day. He's 19. He lives in a different city. He's going to college, and he was here for the summer, just went back. And he's moving into an apartment. He's got all these things going on, and he has this fear building up. And I sort of said, okay, let's get to the bottom of the fear. What really is the problem here? And he said, and he sort of went through his list, and I said, but is that true? Because these are all the examples that show that one little thought you have is so wrong. So you're wasting all of this time and energy getting stressed and being anxious because of this one fearful thought, yet all the evidence points towards something different.
Yeah. And exactly, like, ask people how much truth there is to that. In your son's case, I love what you say, like, hey, there's all of this that proves that it's possible. Why are you focused on the one thing that was keeping you from doing what you want? And I do the same thing with my son. Like, I know, like, he'll think of something like a reason why not to do it. And I go, but look at all the benefits of doing it. Right. So it's just a thought process. But that's a great example. Like, listen to what your family members and your employees for leaders, what are they saying? And what are their hangups? But the best part too for leaders, ask questions, ask them more questions that probe down to more and more answers, like you just did with your son. What about this? What about this? What about that? And then it's like, they start realizing, oh, that doesn't make any sense. It's just this, for whatever reason, they were hung up on that and they won't do what they really want to do. So I encourage all my leaders, who are all the clients of mine who are leaders in organizations, CEOs and presidents, ask your staff questions. And not just how you feeling today, but so based on what you just told me, how much of this, but whatever it may, just behavioral-based interview, or I say behavioral-based interview questions is what we use when you hire people. But the same thing happens when they're still employed there. You can ask rehiring questions. So behavioral-based. So what is it that you're thinking that this can't work? Well, when was the last time that whatever didn't work, or what was the outcome? How did you feel with that outcome? And what do you think we could change now that would change the process moving forward? But really ask people open-ended questions where they have a chance to think, solve a problem, and sit back and listen to them. People love to be heard. They love to share their thoughts and feelings, but they need an environment that they're comfortable doing that in. And that comes back to the trust.
And part of that is also, what aren't they saying? Because, in the situation with my son, the conversation started off very differently. And you have to ask those probing questions to drill down and say, okay, we're not dealing with this situation. I believe we're actually dealing with, say, a fear or a limiting belief. Where do you think that's coming from? What do you think is fueling it? and you sort of, you get it from both, you get it from above, but you also get it from below and digging in, and it's like, where did this come from? How do we deal with it? And I'm gonna assume, not that we should assume, but in that situation, that behavioral conversation that you were just talking about, it's the same thing, is getting to the root of the problem rather than saying, oh, that won't work. It's asking those questions. Well, why won't it work? When hasn't it worked? What are we basing this on? So you're sort of attacking it from both sides, because that's when you actually get to, well, it's not that it's not going to work. It's just going to take 5 times as long. It's going to take more manpower. It's going to cause a big headache, and it's going to cause all of this. Now we're getting somewhere.
Yes. Yes. And I love what you say, come from above and come from below. Ask these behavioral questions like, why is it that you're feeling this way? And one really good question, let's take a minute, close your eyes, think about a time that you were in this similar situation or you experienced similar feelings. So really get to the root and the feeling, like you said, the root cause, but the feeling they're having around this fear or limiting belief. What is it? Oh, well, because the last time that I ran this project or the last time I signed up for a race, this happened. Well, what's the truth and the reality of this happening again, right? So you just keep probing. But you know what? It takes energy. It takes action on your part. And you have to be willing to want to help the other person. Of course you do. You're your son's mom. Some leaders are like, I don't have time for that. Well, then you have to make time for your staff. You have to, and it doesn't have to be that lengthy of time. Once a week, I highly recommend that leaders or managers meet with their one-on-one with their staff. So if they have 20 minutes, even 30 minutes or an hour a week devoted to that individual where they do most of the talking and the manager sits back and listens, you'll be amazed how more efficient you are, because the employee saves what they need for that weekly meeting because it's their time. They feel special with you. They come in very organized. They make things happen. And you actually are more efficient because you say you had 8 staff. Yeah, that could be 8 hours a week, but it's only 8 hours a week. It's not all day long coming in and asking a bunch of questions. So it's a really good way, like devote time for folks and show them that you care as a leader, or in your case, as a parent, which I know you do.
Yeah. And I think one of the things we forget in communicating certain ideas or proposing something is that we may have way more information on the subject than the person that we're communicating with. So we're coming from a point of knowledge, and we don't necessarily realize that the person on the other side of the table isn't armed with that same level of knowledge. So that's how, for me, I've seen that. I've done it myself, where you're talking two completely different things because you realize, oh, wait a second, they're not coming from the same point as I am. I didn't supply enough background information.
Yes. And that's why along the way, if you say, hey, are you still following me? Or if we all learned how to paraphrase and say, hey, so just so we're on the same page, if everybody did that, like if I was getting my car washed, just so we're on the same page, you're going to do this, this, and that, right? I wouldn't have had the problem this last time I took my car in, because I thought they were going to do it was on their list, but they didn't. But if I had that, hey, an extra step in telling them what my expectations were, based on what they were providing was the service, then that would be really great. But absolutely, people need to check in. And if you're a leader who's been 15 years or whatever it is, right, and you have a newer staff member, it's really good to not come in. I've seen this a lot, not so much anymore, but we're doing it this way because we always did it this way. And I've always done it this way for 20 years, right? That's right. It's crazy.
Oh my God.
It's crazy.
I have the perfect saying for that.
Do you? What?
Hit me again. It feels so good when you stop.
I love it.
I use that all the time. It's just like, really? We're dancing this one again.
Exactly. So, I encourage people to go in. Yes, you have more knowledge. You probably have, but what's wrong with during the conversation checking in. So what do you know about this subject? Before I get into everything I know, what do you know? And they might say, I know a car has 4 wheels on it. Okay. Well, I know how to change the oil, whatever, right? For an example. But I think, what's wrong with asking the questions? So I guess the takeaways are like, ask a lot of questions, listen twice as much as you talk, really listen to what you brought it up, not just what they're saying, what's coming out of their mouth, but what they're not saying. That's huge, because that's really where their fear is and their scares. That's really what's keeping them from doing what they want, because they might not even know what to say, so they're not saying it. But if you've been there, done that, I've seen this too. Don't make the poor employee suffer through it. Share your knowledge, but ask them for, hey, is it okay if I give you some information here? Is it okay if I share this? Because some people don't want a bunch of advice. So if you have like we are just talking back and forth, like two-way dialogue, and really listening to what the person's saying and respond, what a wonderful way to communicate. It's just really, I think it's a learned skill.
Most definitely. And I think there's a lot of people out there that have a whole lot more learning to do. So where is the best place for people to connect with you?
Best place for me is going to be on the website, Dynamism. It's DYNAMISM leadership.com.
Well, if you're looking at connecting with Jeannie, make sure you check out the show notes. I will have all of her links in there. And Jeannie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, Lucy, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure. You're such a great one to communicate with. I really appreciate it.
Why, thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride, 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 ride. Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride, 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 ride. Roller coaster. Ride, ride. Roller coaster.